Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us for Aspiration and Resilience, Arab Youth and the COVID-19 Era, our virtual event focusing on the aspirations of Arab youth and why we in the United States should care. I have to tell you, this is one of my favorite events. We did this last year. It's interesting to look at how another part of the world is thinking about its future. And it's one of those things that if you compare it to how a lot of our youth in this country are looking at their future, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of commonality. And that's why I really enjoy what we are going to talk about in a moment, which is the Arab Youth Survey. This is the first event in a series of conversations we're going to have this year and next on this topic throughout the United States. In most societies, the youth typically take the lead in bringing about change. It's no different in the Arab world. A large swath of the population in the Middle East, some 240 million people, are under the age of 30. That's 30% of the population, the highest in the world. But having a young population doesn't automatically translate into a dividend for economic growth and prosperity. It can translate into a lot of frustration. So what is the right mix of policy and cooperation between the public and private sectors to create an environment of success and hope for youth and in turn the region? Today, with thought leaders and students from the region, we'll discuss how the aspirations of youth can turn into a society of increased modernity, better educational experiences, good jobs, a balanced blend of secularism, and widened personal liberties. Before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsor, the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Washington, D.C., for making this conversation possible. But before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. First, you can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillArabYouth. I wish we'd call it the hashtag the Hill Youth everywhere, but today we're going to focus on our friends in the Arab world. We're broadcasting live. We'll be taking your questions throughout the program. And if you experience any trouble with the live stream, please refresh the page. I laugh at this point. Sometimes it works, but hopefully that'll be a quick fix for you. I'm now joined by His Excellency Yusuf Al Otaiba, a good friend of mine, Ambassador of the United States for the United Arab Emirates. Ambassador, I'm glad to see you. But let me just say, I preceded my comment saying, I am fascinated each year by this BCW Arab Youth Survey. It's thousands of interviews. We're going to have Sunil John talk to us in a moment. You're giving the welcoming comments, not me. But I want to say it's such a fascinating journey into the many issues that matter. And I want to thank you for helping to support this, because I look at this as something we in America ought to be curious about. So thanks for supporting today, and would love to hear your thoughts.
My pleasure. Like you, Steve, I think this is one of my favorite events because this is one of my favorite reports and surveys that I get to see. It is eye-opening every single year. We look at it and we are surprised by the findings on some cases, but we are reassured by the findings on other cases. But what's eye-opening and why I get really interested, it really gives a voice to what young people think in very clear terms, in very clear answers, with very clear numbers. And like you said in the introduction, this is a direct refutation of when people say, well, the West and the Middle East are different, or we want different things. If you did the exact same poll in the Western world, in the United States and Europe, I bet you'll get very similar answers. Young people are tired of corruption. They're worried about the rising cost of living. They're worried about getting their jobs. They care about their identity. They care about their culture, but they want a better future. I don't think that's exclusive to the Middle East. I think that involves young people all around the world. This survey tells us in detail what young people are thinking, what they believe, how they view themselves, their challenges, their opportunities. And I am happy that we found a way to promote this, because I really think it's important for the West to understand what young Arabs are going through and how they see the future.
Well, before you say goodbye to us, I want to thank you for your comments. But because of some of the major steps the UAE has taken, and I'm not saying this to make the UAE happy, I did reach out to the Israeli embassy and to the DCM there, and I said, give me a star, give me somebody who's an Israeli youth who's just like on his or her game. And so we've got Eli joining us later in the program. It would be great. But this is a first where we can talk about the Middle East region in a broader sense, in part because of the work of your government. So I'm going to just give you 15 seconds to nail that if you'd like to.
So Israel is part of our region. You can't pretend they're not there. And I'm sure Israeli youth are going through the same kind of things that Arab youth are going through. I'm sure they're all worried about Corona. I'm sure they're all worried about if they're going to have a job. I'm sure they're all worried about infrastructure and education and healthcare. I don't think Israel should be excluded from any of these conversations. The Abraham Accords opened the door for them to be able to be part of this conversation with us. But even if there was no Abraham Accord, what they're going through and what we're going through is going to be very, very similar.
Well, with that, I want to thank you, Ambassador Youssef Otaiba. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's program. Let's hear what people have to say.